Tonight, you will board a wooden world. You will not be tested. You will not be forced to remember anything. Nothing here will hurry you. A ship like this lives on patience, on tides, and on time metered not by clocks but by sand and bells. We will walk slowly. We will sit, and listen, and breathe with the vessel. And if you fall asleep, that is the most faithful thing you can do aboard a galleon. Give yourself over to the motion and let the sea carry you. Your ship is broad-beamed, high-sided, with a proud stern that holds carvings bleached by salt and sun. She is iron-fastened and oak-ribbed. In the language of the yard, she is well found. But to the people who live within her, she is simply home. Afloat between horizons, a lantern swings at the gangway. A rope net hugs the hull. You step from the certainty of stone to the breath of timber. And beneath your feet the deck accepts you with a hush that is half welcome, half warning. This is a place that moves. Breathe in. Resin. Tar. Hemp. Salt. The faint, clean edge of ash from the galley stove. Breathe out. Let your shoulders fall. The pier slips away into darkness. The ship has you now at anchor. The galleon is quietly busy, even when she seems to sleep. Small tasks continue. Someone rubs tallow into a block so it will run without complaint. Someone else checks the lashes on a water butt. Near the bow, a figure with a palm and needle mends a seam. The stitches are small, patient bites of twine, one after another. Like a lullaby you can see. Look forward. The bowsprit, long and purposeful, points over the water like a compass needle. A net of stays supports it, a web that holds the windward life of the ship. Look aft, the high stern castle with galleries and windows. A wooden cliff that shelters the deck from weather and breaks the wind. Between them, the main deck, open to the sky. And above it the varied geometry of rigging, shrouds like ladders, stays like taut lines in a drawing, and yards that lie across the masts like outstretched arms at rest. Everything is tied. Everything is belayed. Every line has a home and a name, braces and sheets, clew lines and bunt lines, halyards, downhauls, and clewy little row bands that hug sail to yard. If you do not know the names, the ship is patient. She will teach you, one calm repetition at a time. Tonight, you only have to listen. Aboard this 17th century world, time comes in half hours, poured from a small glass of sand. When the sand runs out, a hand turns it, and the bell speaks. 2 strokes is 1 hour. 4 strokes is 2. When you hear 8, the watch changes. People trade places with people. Hands trade tools. Hammocks trade warm bodies. And the ship, unchanged, keeps sliding through the world. There are names for the watches. Old and comforting, the first watch. Deepening evening. The middle watch. The night's quiet backbone. The morning watch, when light begins to consider returning. The forenoon and afternoon, when the sun walks the deck. Then the dog watches, short and split to keep the rhythm of duty always shifting. Even the words are drowsy. Dog watches, as if time itself curled at your feet, blinking slowly. On this ship, your watch is easy tonight. You are a quiet companion, standing where the quarterdeck opens to the sea, watching the lantern's halo breathe with the motion. You have little to do but be here, and that is more than enough. Below, the sleeping deck waits. In the age of galleons, sailors sleep in hammocks, lengths of sturdy canvas with eyelets whipped round and clews at each end, slung from beams so the body can cradle safely when the ship rolls. A hammock keeps a person clear of wet planks and crawling things. It hugs you and gives way. It is the ship's embrace. You learn a small ritual. Fold the canvas along its length. Settle diagonally. Never along the line. The diagonal lays you flat. Shoulder to the cloth. Knee bent. A blanket over you if the night is sharp. Your sea chest under one edge. A pillow made from a spare shirt. 2 small knots on the lashings, turned the same way every time so your hands know them in the dark. If you listen, the ship tells you the weather. In calm, The hammocks hang like moons between beams, still and safely moored. In a swell, they rock with long patience. In a blow, they lift and sigh. And you ride the rhythm like breathing, in, out, up, down. The canvas creaks softly as if remembering 1,000 other nights when it kept someone safe. For now, you do not lie down. You touch the hammock with fingertips. A promise that later you will return. You walk quietly up again, to let the night introduce itself, amidships. Under a simple brick and iron box called the caboose, the ship's cook tends what counts. At sea, as comfort. Fire aboard a wooden home is a careful thing. The stove is chained and chocked. The floor around it is sanded. The cook is both a guardian and a small magician, coaxing meals from salted pork, peas, dried fish, oatmeal, and the biscuit that is less bread than durable promise. You open a barrel. The biscuits are square and pale, with a baking that has chased out moisture and mercy alike. Some sailors knock them against the table to set the weevils walking, then look away. Some dunk them in broth until they remember being bred. In a cup, the water rations are careful, measured by cask and day. Wine or beer appear depending on the flag and the voyage. Rum finds its way aboard now and then, sometimes neat, sometimes mixed with water to quiet its edge. Nothing is hurried. Even hunger becomes a gentle thing, answered by simple heat and shared spoons. On certain days there is something fresh, an onion saved for a long time, a turnip, a lemon if fortune smiled at the last port. When a pan of onions touches fat and turns sweet, morale rises as tangibly as steam. The cook knows this and watches faces. Silent as an astronomer. In darkness the rigging is a forest of lines, each with a purpose and a memory. Men move through it like cats, barefoot for grip, palms tough as rope, quietly sure. If a sail needs to be furled, they climb into the night and gather the canvas along the yard, arms thrown around its heavy belly. They tie the gasket with 2 patient turns and a tuck. If it needs to be loosed, they lean and let the cloth fall in a soft thunder, then let it draw, huge and obedient, as the wind puts its hand to work. Up there, the ship is a whisper away from the stars. The mast sways slowly, and the horizon becomes a circle drawn by motion rather than by light. A sailor up a shroud knows the universe by feel, when the spar lifts, when it dips, when it says hold. He answers with knees and fingertips. There is a lullaby written in hemp and gravity. Even if you are far below, you can hear it if you listen. The ship finds her way with a mixture of memory and small, faithful tools. The compass waits in its box, the needle trembles, then steadies. The log line slips over the stern. A weighted wooden chip trailing a measured rope with knots tied at honest intervals. The sand runs in a half-minute glass. A hand counts the knots that pass between finger and thumb. Speed, someone says quietly, and lifts the chip aboard again with wet, salt-glossed rope. A traverse board receives the verdict, pegs in little holes to show each half-hour's course and speed. A wooden diary of motion. At noon, if the sun consents, a navigator with a cross-staff or backstaff measures its height and writes a neat line in the log. Longitude is still a stubborn riddle in this century, but latitude is a friend on good days. The rest is memory, judgment, and the ocean's deep courtesy for those who pay attention. You do not have to master this. You only have to imagine a person at a small table, bent over a scrap of light and careful figures. The ship breathing around them like a large, patient animal. A galleon is never finished. The carpenter knows this and accepts it like weather. He carries a small kingdom, adze, auger, chisels, a caulking iron, a mallet, a bag of oakum that smells like tar and flax. He listens to the hull the way a doctor listens to a chest. If a seam talks too much, he gives it oakum and a line of hot pitch. If a beam complains, he props it like an elder with a better chair. He checks the pumps and the limber holes where water will sneak, because water always does. Down in the orlop, the deepest habitable deck, his lantern makes a moving room. Rope coils hang like sleeping serpents. Spare spars lie under lashings. Polite and patient. Barrels rest in cradles. Their bellies round and trusting. This is the part of the ship that never sees sun. It stays itself through persistence and attention. In the carpenter's slow tour, there is reassurance, someone is always listening. Even to the dark. Guns sleep too. Under their covers. The gunner and his mates keep them oiled and lashed so they will not wander in a seaway. Iron has a way of asking for respect, the crew gives it with clean tools and orderly minds. Powder is locked away in the magazine. Where candles are not allowed, only the safer glow of a carefully tended lamp behind the screen. Around each carriage lie the small, tidy kingdoms of a gun's needs, a worm, a sponge, a rammer, a coin. Shot piles in pyramids that look deliberate and calm. There is no thunder tonight. Only the discipline that makes thunder. If ever called. Efficient and brief. Even in peace. Order is a kindness. It means fewer surprises. It means people sleep, the cook calls softly. And a patient line forms. There is peas tonight, dried peas simmered until they become something like comfort. With bits of pork to persuade them along. A square of biscuit softens in the bowl. Someone has an onion and shares it without ceremony. Another man produces a small twist of salt kept in a scrap of cloth and taps a few friendly grains into a friend's hand. There is talk. The kind that lives at the edge of drowsy, a sail scene at dusk. A seabird at noon. Whether the swell is kinder than yesterday. The cup that goes down the line is carefully given and carefully received. Water has been aboard as long as anyone, it carries a memory of oak and the quiet taint of travel. Some ships add a little wine or beer when they can. Others carry spirits in small ration. Whatever it is tonight, it is enough. The body feels heat and relaxes. The mind understands, you have eaten. You will be allowed to rest. 8 bells. And the watch turns. A warm body leaves a hammock. And a cool body replaces it. And both are grateful. The deck hears new feet. The night accepts them without comment. From shore a dog barks. Surprised by the idea of ships. The tide makes up its mind to go. The anchor's chain sighs a little as the ship swings to the stream. You put your hands on the rail and let the wood speak through your palms. It is worn smooth by other hands. Other nights. Other people who stood here and were not asked to be anything more than present. If your eyes grow heavy, that is the ship doing what she does best, persuading you to travel without moving. Close your eyes and you can still feel it, the surge when the capstan takes the load. The faint vibration of the deck when the anchor lifts from mud. Voices are not sharp. They are careful. Nothing on a big ship is helped by shouting unless the sea insists. Braces are manned. Yards are braced round. The sails, reefed short for a gentle start, fill with a soft, serious sound like a heavy curtain finding its gravity. The harbor grows larger as you leave it, lights spread out like a necklace unfastened and laid on a table. The shore turns from place to shape, from shape to notion, from notion to memory. The bow lifts. And now the ship speaks in a different voice, not the lap of a tethered animal but the measured, confident hush of motion. Somewhere, a man turns the glass. Somewhere, a hand notes the wind, a whisper over the quarter. A polite friend. You do not need to see any of this. It can pass like a long exhale while you rest. On many ships, scrubbing the deck begins at first light. Here, while the night still owns the world, a couple of hands draw seawater in buckets and sluice the planks so the morning will smell clean and feel new. The brush is not hurried, it murmurs. Brine runs to the scuppers and slips back to the mother that made it. The sailor's world is made of small favors like this. You do what you can for the person you do not see yet, the man who will come on deck, yawning, and find a place ready for him. He will not know which hands moved in the darkness. He doesn't have to. On a galleon, belonging is mostly made of these quiet exchanges. There is rain offshore, but the night offers only a few large drops, polite, exploratory. They dot the rail and are gone. The sails curve a little more. The helmsman stands with easy attention. One hand on the tiller bar. Shoulders loose. He watches the telltales, thin strips of wool that report what the wind thinks of the canvas. He watches the stars when they are out. And the black water when they decide to rest. A galleon is not a quick ship. She is a steadfast one. She persuades the ocean rather than racing it. Each small change, an inch on a brace, a handspan on a sheet, adds to comfort before it adds to speed. Tonight, comfort is what we are here for. The ship has passengers who did not sign articles. Rats love a vessel for the same reason people do. There is always something to eat if you are clever. To persuade them otherwise. Many crews keep a cat. Or several. A cat is a good sailor. It is low to the deck and certain of its own dignity. It sleeps wherever the sun or a warm pipe invites it. And wakes just in time to be useful. Its purr is an engine that runs on satisfaction alone. On some nights, someone will swear the rats are singing along with the ropes when the wind hits the right note. On others, the cat will offer a trophy that is accepted with gratitude and disposed of without ceremony. Life afloat is a democracy of habits. Everyone contributes. Everyone naps. Not everybody agrees with the sea. When a new hand comes aboard, his stomach may decide to object in principle. The crew accepts this with the casual kindness of people who have all been humbled by motion. There are remedies: a biscuit chewed slowly while standing in fresh air, a cup of warm, thin broth, a slice of lemon if a kind soul has won, a string tied around the wrist because an older sailor says it helps. Sometimes, belief is the best medicine. And the sea, like a stern aunt, eventually forgives. There are other aches: a back made frank by a yard's weight, a finger pinched by a clumsy block, a toe stubbed in the dark. For these, there is oil for rubbing, and sleep, and the knowledge that tomorrow's work will be the same and therefore easier. Every ship collects rituals like barnacles. A man might touch the mainmast before going aloft. A quick pat of respect. Another might not whistle, because it is said to call wind you cannot send away. Someone ties a scrap of ribbon in a rattlin and never tells why. One keeps the day by psalms. Another, by a rhyme memorized when he was 8. If you do none of these, the ship holds your silence kindly. If you do all, she holds that too. The ocean is large enough for every hope, every fear, and every bargain made in the mind at 3 in the morning. Tonight, the only bargain required is simple: you agree to rest. And the ship agrees to move gently. Sometimes a forecast promises drama and delivers only a lesson in scale. Far off, a bank of cloud flexes. It is impressive but uninterested. The wind here freshens and then thinks better of it. The helmsman shifts his stance as if to say, "I am ready," and then finds he is not needed. The braces are eased a hand and later taken in again. There is the almost thunder that never commits. The sea heaves and sighs. Too lazy to begin anything serious. In these not storms, a ship learns to be at ease with suspense. The crew learns too. People check things that do not require checking and find reassurance anyway. You might walk the deck and then stand in the lee of a boat and let the shelter have you for a while. If sleep taps your shoulder, you bow and follow. There are nights when motion ceases as if the ocean has forgotten what it was doing. The sail luffs politely. The bow loses its hush. The lantern's flame stands taller. Calms at sea can be trials when time presses. Tonight, they are invitations. The ship becomes a floating village at rest. Someone plays a soft tune on a pipe. More breath than song. Someone else tells a story that meanders without needing to end. The stars bother to attend. A man on the forecastle leans on a cable and allows himself to think of land without sadness. Another wipes a spoon clean and puts it away as if it were silver. You drift in your own calm and notice how the body softens when nothing is asked of it. Even a well-found galleon drinks. Seams work. Planks swell and ease. The pumps are a part of life, not a sign of failure. In a quiet hour, a few hands take their turn, and the handles move in a rhythm that is not a complaint but a reassurance. Water taken in is water sent out. The hull sighs as if relieved of a small worry. The sound is hypnotic. Push. Pull, sluice. Hush. The men at the pump lean their weight and share it. A kind of cooperative sleep while standing. When the water runs clear, someone nods. The brake is secured. Life returns to general idleness. Tar is the ship's perfume. It is in the rigging, in the seams, in the palm of any man who has worked today. Fresh laid rope has a bright, grassy smell softened by pitch. Old rope smells like every rain it has met. In a small corner near the mainmast, a boy learns how to splice, his tongue showing at the corner of concentration. He opens the lay with a fid and tucks the strand the way he was taught, over, under, through. He does it again and again until his hands remember. The rope will hold because of this quiet time. So will the ship. You run your fingers over a coil and feel the story of it. Each fiber once stood in a field, a stalk among stalks. And now it is a line that can lift a sail that can move a house over water. The world is very good at transformation. Below, in a corner that belongs to anyone who needs to read, a map is unrolled and held at its corners by pewter cups. The chart has faded places where fingers have traced a voyage before. The coastlines look like thoughts, not yet certain, but not arbitrary. The navigator makes a mark that means here. Probably. He is not bothered by uncertainty. He lives comfortably with probably. It is enough to arrive near where you intended and let the sea teach you the rest. You look. You nod. You leave him to his quiet companionship with ink and possibility. Sea clothes are simple, wool that forgives weather, linen that breathes, leather that endures friction. In the 17th century, colors are what life provides, undyed, faded, tar-kissed. A shirt sleeves a body. A cap minds the ears. Shoes are more useful than handsome. A spare set, if you are lucky, goes on a line near the galley to warm. The smell of smoke clings and becomes an element of home like salt and wood. When a patch is needed, it is a quiet hour's work. The needle bites and gifts. Bites and gifts. And the rent disappears under patient mercy. A small joy, turning out pockets at day's end. A coal of tobacco. A twist of wine. A pebble that looks like an island. A button saved for someone whose coat is almost a coat again. These are treasure. They make sleep simpler because they prove the day had meaning. Near dawn, the ship joins others in a quiet roadstead. A safe bite in the coastline. Voices drift between hulls like lazy birds. The world is grey and thoughtful. The lead man sings the depth in a tone that has measured mornings for as long as anyone remembers, by the mark, 5. And a little. The bottom takes the anchor and holds it without fuss. The ship bows her head to the chain and rests. Sails are furled neatly. Rope is coiled with respect. The deck is swept as if expecting a guest. Which is another way of saying the deck expects itself. Out beyond the reef, a whale exhales and rights the cold air with steam. Closer, a boat glides past with 2 men and a basket and a promise of fish if luck is awake. You stand for one more moment and then go below. The hammock you tested earlier is still your size. Oatmeal does not require applause to do its work. It arrives in bowls and warms hands before it warms bellies. Someone adds a curl of butter saved by craft or luck. Someone else shakes a little sugar from a cherished cone and pretends not to notice other eyes. There is no hurry. Morning is a shape the ship draws with small, repetitive lines. The water cask gives the day its measure again, cups counted, staves tapped, dates scratched with a thumbnail. The cooper will have a look later, listening the way the carpenter listens. Hearing the difference between enough and almost. Attention is the ship's true currency. It buys safety and rest. There will be a shore errand, the purser says so. And the list appears on a scrap of paper, onions if they are cheap. A side of bacon if the vendor knows the mate. Candles at a price not insulting. A coil of rope that will not betray its weave. Fresh water to complement what the casks remember. Also letters, if any have caught up with the voyage. Also the bootless comfort of staring at shop windows that have nothing you can carry. A sailor on land is usually, and harmlessly, A ghost of himself, walking on planks only he can see. Surprised when the road does not move. For now, though, no one must go. The ship catches her breath and offers yours back to you. Slower and steadier than it was last night. A torn selvage on her topsail is addressed by 3 pairs of hands. They speak little. The seam says more. Stitches march like tiny men across a frontier and pacify it with order. Waxed twine leaves a neat, dark line that smells like honey and work. When the needle sticks, someone laughs softly as if the cloth has made a point. They knot off, rub the ridge flat, pass the edge through their fingers, and decide that weather may come as it pleases. This is rest disguised as labor. The mind wanders while the hands repeat a kindness. Sleep is made easier by an hour like this even if the body never lay down. The bosun is the ship's memory. He knows where every line lies and why. How to call it so it comes. How to coil it so it will want to be used again. He teaches with demonstration more than with speech. He shows how to throw a coil so the line pays out without kink. He shows how to belay so the line knows it is safe. He shows how to stow a sail so the next hand who touches it will bless you with a wordless grin. He does not hurry. He assumes there is time to do things properly because there must be. The sea will always provide urgency. The crew must provide patience. Powder is weighed and repacked into cartridges for convenience should loudness ever be requested by fate. The gunner's hands are clean and dry. The room is hushed as a chapel. No flame is allowed here, even the idea of fire waits outside. The men work with deliberate grace. And when they are done they mark the tally and leave as if exiting a nursery where something sleeping must not be disturbed. The message is simple and practical. Readiness exists so that worry doesn't have to. Then they go to breakfast and talk about fish. Between voyages, paper is the ocean of memory. A man writes to a mother in a tidy, school-taught hand, describing the way the stars look from the mizzen top and how the cat has learned to sleep in the bosun's locker. Another writes to a wife, a letter full of small truths and well-meant omissions, promising that the ship is safe as a church. A third writes to himself, notes on knots he wants to remember. A sketch of an island shaped like a sleeping dog. The words to a song with no tune yet. Wax seals the words. The letter waits until someone's pocket can be trusted to reach a place that has a door. It is not, strictly speaking, noon. The sun is a little reluctant. Still, the day declares itself new. Lines are checked, small errands are finished, hammocks are slung high to make room. The galley yields a second kindness in the form of something warm that might be soup if you are generous. The captain appears long enough to be seen and then vanishes again into the weather he is reading from the horizon. You feel your body settling into the ship's grammar. Things that were foreign last night are now understood without words. How to plant your feet. How to reach for a rail. How to duck without thinking. The ship teaches. And you have learned enough to be comfortable. The rest of the day can take care of itself. You have slept deeply. Perhaps without intending to, and you will sleep again when the watch turns and the bell confesses to the passage of time. If you are still here, it is because you like the sound of wooden promises. You like the way rope remembers the last hand that smoothed it. You like lantern light on brass, canvas sighing, and water writing its endless letter against the hull. You are welcome to stay as long as you wish. You may walk the deck one more time and count the things that feel safe. The cleats, the belaying pins, the coils laid like sleeping snakes, the neatness of a deck that expects rain but is not afraid of it, the patience of men who will do this all again tomorrow, and then again, until the voyage fills a map and empties a season. Or you may go below and settle into your canvas cradle, turned on the diagonal, blanket on your shoulders, the warm shape of the ship wrapping you without weight. The hammock knows what to do. The night knows what to do. You do not have to do anything at all. The longboat kisses the galleon's side and waits like a patient horse. 2 hands climb down the side ropes and settle on the thwarts. The coxswain says nothing, his hands already know the harbour. A small list is tucked under a hat band, onions if they are honest, candles if they are sound. A slab of bacon if it smells like promise is kept. And letters, always letters. The oars dip and rise. The blades make their oval rooms in the water. And each room closes behind you without complaint. The ship grows larger and then smaller in a gentle contradiction. It is always large. But it becomes the right size for the water it floats in. You are not in a hurry. Nothing good ashore will vanish in the next quarter hour. On the beach. Baskets wait. A dog lifts its head and decides against barking. The men step out into the shallows and carry the boat a few paces so she will rest safely. A vendor greets them with the calm of someone who has seen ships since before he had teeth. The barter is polite and measured. An onion can hold a crew together for a day. A strip of good pork can redeem a week. Candles can make the dark agree to be useful. When the boat returns, the ship accepts these small kindnesses with the dignity of a city that knows itself. The cooper tests a cask by listening. He does not trust his eyes alone. A hoop is set, tapped, and turned. A stave speaks when it meets its neighbors properly. Wood has a way of declaring harmony. He pours a little water and leans his ear to the bung. A whisper of a leak is found. Invited to confess. And forgiven with a wedge no thicker than a thumbnail. He rubs the rim with tallow. Signs the head with a mark only he cares to read. And nods to the men who will wrestle the weight. Fresh water changes a ship's mood. The way a kind sentence changes a room. Along the weather deck, two men sit with oakum in their laps. The fibers tardark and stubborn. They roll it into strands, set it with a caulking iron, and persuade it into a seam that has chosen today to remember the sea too clearly. The mallet keeps a pulse, not hurried, not lazy, simply true. A boy tends the pitch kettle, careful as a novice acolyte. When the oakum settles, the hot pitch follows. A thin black river that cools to quiet armor. The ship approves. She shows approval by becoming less damp, which is the sweetest compliment a hull can offer. A length of new line smells faintly of sun and soil. Someone tells the boy how rope is made in a rope walk. Men pacing the long, straight lane, twisting strands into yarns. Yarns into strands. Strands into rope. While the tar lends its blessing. It is all patience. The older sailor says. And the patience lives in the rope when you use it. You splice an eye because the bosun thinks you should know how. Over. Under. Through. The tuck is kind. Not tight. You milk the splice until it lies like a natural piece of the world. The bosun nods. Not because you have pleased him, but because work that will not betray the next man is its own praise. The captain looks past the horizon at the sky that writes above it. He sees high mares' tails. The cirrus that often mean tomorrow's wind will come from another quarter. He sees a swell from the south and a ruffle from the east. And a line between them that is not yet an argument. He closes his eyes. Not because he is tired, but because he is listening with the part of the mind that keeps old voyages near. Then he walks aft and adjusts the course a degree. It is the kind of small decision that makes comfort. The kind that never enters the log because it belongs to experience. At midday, the Galleon humbles herself for an hour and heaves to, sails trimmed so that motion is gentler and a pot can keep more of its contents. Salt beef appears, coaxed in water until its salt has changed from command to counsel. A pudding the men call duff is lifted from its cloth bag. Heavy and shy. Someone has prunes. Saved. They claim. For a special moment, this is that moment. A small measure of spirits becomes a larger measure of kindness when it is watered and shared. Faces soften. Voices fall into a register that belongs to afternoon. The sea accepts the ship's pause without offense. The boy learns a bowline by story. The rabbit comes out of the hole. The old man says, goes around the tree, and back into the hole. The loop that results is faithful and sensible. It can be broken with a thought even after it has labored all day. He learns the sheet bend. 2. The way of joining two ropes that do not agree about thickness but agree to work anyway. His hands settle into the grammar of line. He will sleep better for having done so. A cloud wanders by with a broom of rain and dusts the ship. Shirts are spread in the rigging to borrow the water. The drops are honest and quick. The deck rinse is clean. A faint rainbow leans upon the world and says that promises can be gentle. When the rain passes, the sun puts its hand on the wet wood and warms it. The shirts dry into the shape of men who will put them on later with a sigh that means better. Seawater cannot make cloth sweet, but it can make it less than sour. A line is strung, and shirts are pinned with bits of wood. The wind works without wages. A sleeve nods as if agreeing with something you said 3 hours ago. A sock takes flight and is caught by a man who claims it was trying to desert. Laughter does not disturb the ship, it oils the parts that would have creaked. A steady wind settles like a good habit. The sails grow round and contented. The helmsman stands with his feet the right distance apart, which is not a measurement you can write down. Flying fish perform their improbable errands over the wave tops. The color of the morning if the morning were shaped like a leaf. A dorado follows lazily, painted by some painter who loved gold too much to use it sparingly. The ship's voice becomes a single, faithful sound. A sentence that goes on saying we are going, we are going, we are going, and never becomes boring. When darkness comes fully, the sea writes with light. The wake hisses in silver as if someone had poured stars into it. Dolphins arrive because they love games that are older than names. They draw lines of cold fire and cross under the bow to teach the ship her own geometry. A man leans over and puts his hand in the water and lifts it out to find his fingers briefly galaxies. No one speaks loudly. A few say nothing at all. The biscuits tonight are firm as memory. You soften them in broth and they become almost bread. Someone jokes that each is baked with a sermon inside. You get to sleep as soon as you find it. Someone else taps one against the table and watches a small animal make a small decision. People look away with the polite blindness sailors cultivate for each other's comforts. The cup passes. Water tastes like the cask that held it and like the miles that have not yet been measured. You drink and feel something in your chest choose to rest. A tune appears that has no beginning and prefers no end. It is made of 5 notes you have known since before you can remember and 3 you may never have met. It does not require you to follow. It will be there if you wander off. It will be there when you return. A man hums harmony without knowing that is what it is called. The ship accepts the offering and folds it into her largest song. In a chest near the captain's cabin lives a rutter. A pilot book thick with other men's careful words, where the current forgets itself, where the reef pretends to be a welcome, how a headland looks from the north and how from the south, which star to trust when the moon is sulking. In the margins, hands have added counsel that is not ready for print but ready for use, good holding ground. Fishers honest. Water sweet if drawn at dawn. Brackish by noon. You read a line at random and feel a kinship with someone you will never meet. He is keeping you safe from a mistake he already made. This is how ships share sleep across years. A navigator shows you how to hold the cross staff to your cheek and slide the transom until the lower edge meets the horizon and the upper edge touches the star. He says the number softly. He does not lecture. He does not need to. You understand the modesty baked into the method. It is not precise, but it is faithful. And faithfulness delivers ships. He points to a pair of stars and lets them teach you east. He points to a dust of light and calls it the road to seasons. You look up as if you have permission. Because you do. The short evening watches turn. A kettle finds its boil and then remembers not to. Bread, such as it is, consents to be cut. The captain walks through shadows like a man insisting gently on being a part of his own ship. He speaks to no one in particular and everyone hears. A cat decides to occupy a coil of line that had imagined itself already occupied. The line yields. Cats outrank cordage in the ship's articles unwritten. Night is not empty. It is a collection of rooms with the doors open. You can visit any of them, the one with the warm smell near the galley, the one with the damp coolness near the head, the one where the cat owns the floor, the one just beneath the mizzen where the wood keeps a memory of sun for hours. If you must walk, walk. If you can sleep, sleep. If you can do neither, Lean on the rail and let the stars talk without requiring answers. A man whittles a pin for a broken toggle. He does it slowly, because there is no price for speed that a ship respects. He measures with his eye and finds his eye honest. He smooths with a bit of sand and breath. He fits the pin and it agrees to live where it is put. His face holds the quiet of having made a small problem apologize. Another man inventories nails, counting them with a nail, tapping one nail for each 10 nails. It is a music so far from urgency that sleep listens and nods. Far away, the world argues with itself. Here, the ship turns her cheek and refuses to be drawn in. The swell is long-hipped and courtly. The wind is a letter that someone wrote yesterday. The helmsman adjusts an inch and then another inch an hour later. This is seamanship at its most humane, the art of not waking what does not need to wake. If your hammock lifts and sets, lift and set with it. If your blanket finds your shoulder again and again as the ship breathes, let it. The day begins not with a shout but with a return. The brush will move. The bucket will not spill more than it must. The deck will glisten and then dry. The cook will put his hand on the kettle and decide the ship deserves warmth again. The carpenter will listen to the timbers and pretend they speak a dialect only he can translate. Someone will say, 8 bells. Someone will answer, I. The rhythm you learned last night will move inside you like an organ you did not know you had. By afternoon, a low headland opens and reveals a roadstead mild as a hand. The ship drops anchor in water that likes ships. The lead says 5 fathoms and a little. The bottom is sand that loves iron. The chain grows a catenary and writes a perfect curve into physics. Boats go by with cargo and gossip. A woman on a quay shades her eyes and decides to forget the ship 1 minute later. Because ships are as common here as wind. You feel something open in your chest that is not a door and not a sail and not a window. It is simply the part of you that becomes larger whenever a place welcomes a vessel. Men go ashore in orderly handfuls. They spend coins on things that will be gone in a day and memories that will hide in their pockets for years. They drink, but not to shouting. They eat something cooked in a pan that has never moved with a wave. They stand still longer than is plausible for a sailor and then laugh at themselves for it. You buy a pencil because yours is almost a thought and not a pencil anymore. You buy a small booklet of blank pages. You put the booklet in a pocket and know already that it will hold fewer words than the voyage deserves and more than it requires. The ship is the same and not the same after shore. Onion skins find their way into a corner. A new coil of rope looks at the older coils and says it will try to live up to them. Candles stand at attention like recruits who have met their sergeant and prefer not to meet him again. The sun thinks about setting and then decides a little practice won't hurt. No priest. No sermon. Only a circle of tired men and a few words that have followed ships for centuries. Gratitude for not having to explain anything to the sea today, a promise to check the lashings before sleep, a mention of a man's mother because all men came from such places, a nod to the absent who are not absent. Only ashore in a different sense. When the circle opens, it leaves behind a better silence than the one it interrupted. Diagonal. Always diagonal. The ship will move. And your body will know it before your mind can compose a sentence. One knee answers the roll, one shoulder trusts gravity. The blanket takes the part of you that still insists on thinking and persuades it to become a smaller thing. Breath becomes tide. Tide becomes sleep. Sleep becomes the sea doing its warmest trick, carrying you without asking you to help. If you wake at 8 bells, it will be because the bell is proud of having learned to speak softly. If you do not wake, it will be because the night has given you permission. The ship changes her angle to the wind as the tide considers its options. The sound is not a sound but a series of kindnesses, a tap that is not a knock, a sigh that is not a warning, a hush that leans into the planks and strokes them. You can listen to this forever and still be on the first page. The night has shrunk to the size of the ship. The world beyond her rails is only a suggestion the sea keeps making and withdrawing. Like a tide of thought. The helmsman hums something too gentle to remember. The compass steadies in its box with the confidence of a small, honest instrument. A man lifts the half-minute glass, watches the bright sand slip like patient rain, and turns it again because that is what the hour asks. You lean a shoulder to the mizzenmast and let its cool grain tell you your reel. The deck moves underfoot in the old, considerate way, not a surprise left in it. Far forward. A rope ends capsward once and then thinks better of repeating itself. The ship knows you are awake and chooses a quieter voice. A thin bank of cloud finds the stars and pockets them for a while. It makes no threat, only a favor to those who steer by the feel of air on the face and by the small grammar of a tiller's weight. The helmsman shifts his feet the width of a coin. You watch the leech of the main, the way it hollows when it wants attention and rounds when it approves. The mate eases a brace the length of a hand, and the sail remembers its manners. This is the kind of seamanship that is only visible to people standing close and awake. It is a kindness performed for the ship and for those who are trying to sleep. A small, sensible breeze asks for a reef, the sort of request you grant before it becomes a demand. Two men go aloft like cats who have done this longer than fear has existed. They belly the canvas, gather it with arms and knees, and lay in the points with a tempo so peaceful it could be mistaken for prayer. Below, a sheet comes home, a clewline gives up its work and accepts a new one. When the yard is dressed tidy and the sail smaller and wiser, the ship lowers her voice another note. A man on deck ties often seals the gesture with a palm on the rope. A goodnight pat given to cordage. The cook has toasted grain in a pan and married it to hot water. The drink is brown and honest and tastes like the idea of bread. It warms the mouth and then the chest and then the place behind the eyes where a headache might have chosen to live. A chipped cup passes hand to hand. No one claims ownership of the recipe, the night invented it. A heel of cheese emerges from a cloth like a small moon. Somebody says a generous thing that will be forgotten perfectly by dawn. That is its gift. The surgeon's world smells of spirit and resin and old leather. He has poultices and patience. Lint rolled by a boy who kept his hands clean all afternoon. And a salve whose recipe is older than the language the crew speaks. He looks at a scraped knuckle and makes a ceremony of washing it, which elevates both knuckle and night. He puts away his tools as if they were sleeping creatures. On a shelf ride 2 oranges, guarded for whoever begins to look like scurvy in the face. They are small suns the crew orbit with their eyes and never mention aloud. Where the coast is thoughtful rather than near, the leadsman asks the sea what it has in mind. He sings the numbers that sound like lullabies even in daylight. The lead returns with its tallow belly telling a little story. Sand, a whisper of shell, a grain of weed. The mate nods as if the ocean has confirmed an address on an old letter. The line is flaked coil by coil. Everything that goes out has learned to come home again in a tidy way. By a lantern in a draftless corner, the sailmaker lays a patch so neat the cloth looks grateful. He strokes wax along the thread until it gleams like a thought about honey. His needle finds the same holes a patient number of times. If you watch too long you will begin to feel the stitch in your own breathing. In, through, ease, out, in, through, ease, out. He knots off with a tiny sailor's flourish no one will ever see and everyone will benefit from. He sits back, looks at the patch not as triumph but as absence of trouble, and smiles with half his face. The quarter lantern has been smoking. A hand lifts the chimney, trims the wick to humility, and the flame becomes a proper citizen again. The glass is wiped on a sleeve until it remembers transparency. Light settles into the panels and chooses a calmer shape. On the sea, even fire learns manners. The glow makes a small room around the compass. You stand in that room for a minute and accept its tiny authority. When you step out of it, the night is larger by comparison and kinder because of it. A darker shadow slides on the starboard beam, no closer than good manners allow. Another ship, hull down and content with her own intentions. Her bell marks the same half hours as yours, which is proof enough that you live on the same planet. Two watchmen see each other and pretend not to, out of respect for the privacy of night. The wakes diverge like sentences choosing different verbs. You feel companioned by strangers. It is one of the sea's least advertised mercies. Every ship gives everyone a second name. A tall man is short. A quiet man is parson. A cat with 3 white toes is admiral. Naturally, someone calls you hammock. Not because you sleep too much, but because you explain things gently and make people want to lie down afterward. You accept it the way rope accepts star, with a shrug and a little gratitude for having been claimed. People sleep more easily among names that fit like worn jackets. The glass completes its small descent. 8 bells fall into the air like coins into a deep purse, one by one, and are never heard again because they became time. The watch changes without ceremony. Warmth is exchanged for duty, and duty for warmth. The deck accepts a new pattern of footsteps and does not register surprise. You descend. The ladder soft under your feet. The sleeping deck greets you with its familiar weather. Your hammock buys your shape for a few hours and overpays with rest. You do not quite sleep and do not quite wake. You drift in the place ships make for those who belong to them. A gull becomes a thought, a coil of rope becomes a coastline, a distant splash becomes the period at the end of a sentence you will never need to finish. The hammock rocks 2 syllables, here, now, and grammar yields to tide. If a rat tiptoes along a beam, it does so respectfully, as if passing through a chapel. The day finds you already half mended by rest. Decks get their rinse and rub. The cook stakes his small claim on warmth again. The carpenter says the hull is telling fewer jokes than yesterday. The boatswain's pipe writes a very short sentence in silver air and then tucks itself away. The sun chooses a slow entrance. No one minds. The ship is a house that keeps itself. A tired seabird rides the main yard for a few heartbeats of rest. It looks at the men below as if they are an idea it will consider later. The bird shakes water from its shoulders, leaves 2 feathers that will be found in a scupper hours from now, and departs like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence the sky was writing. The men look up and nod. Even the cat pretends not to care. The anchor comes aboard with a polite protest. Mud says goodbye reluctantly. The ship leans into her work the way a body leans into a favorite chair. Braces are manned with the unspoken confidence of hands that did this yesterday and will do it tomorrow. The sails open like woken lungs, taking in miles and giving back smaller worries. You watch from the quarter and feel time fold into itself. Last night. Early voyages. The first day you stepped aboard, until all of it is simply going. Morning draws its own map in the sky, long strokes of high white. Small cursive of puffs low over the water. The captain reads it the way a man reads a familiar hand. He does not rush to judgment. He lets the letters settle. He adjusts the course by a degree because the clouds suggest it would be polite. You feel the turn only as an idea. Then as a gentle ascent to the rails. On the table, the chart lies open to a page with coastlines that look more like memory than law. A finger traces a route drawn yesterday, nods at the wind written today, and leaves the future to keep its dignity. When the morning found a seam, hands follow. The rhythm is old enough to be its own prayer. Set, tap, withdraw, set, tap, withdraw. Oakum accepts the thin darkness and becomes a certainty. Pitch follows. A black ribbon that cools to quiet strength. The deck breathes easier for it. So do the men. The ship knows the difference between water where it wants and water where it doesn't. She prefers the former. You watch, and your breathing almost keeps the mallet's pace. Until it does. By late morning the sun gathers itself and leans. Shadows sharpen into helpful rulers. Shirts grow thin with light. A bucket is dipped, and water in measured cups persuades throats to be reasonable. The cook opens the galley door and lets a little heat escape as if sharing a secret. The helmsman squints toward a horizon that has decided to be honest and straight. He rolls his shoulders once and then remembers not to fight a day that is determined to be kind. The navigator brings the sun down to the edge of the world and asks the glass to be generous with the last of its sand. Clouds flirt and then move on. The number he speaks is simple as a door, the height of the day. The latitude's small confession. He marks it neatly, then writes the time. which is not strictly true and strictly doesn't matter. He smiles as a craftsman smiles when an answer shakes hands with a guess. No one applauds. The sea has taught them applause can be quiet and still be real, for practice rather than need. The watch goes aloft and takes a topsail in, lays it snug, then lets it fall again in a controlled waterfall of cloth. Knots are tied at a tempo fit for sleep, gaskets laid like lines in a hymn. The boatswain says nothing sharp. He saves sharp for weather that insists. Today, the lesson is ease, how to do a thing so the thing will want to be done for you next time. Below, you coil what they hand down. The rope lies in your palm like a domesticated snake. It consents to circles, it consents to rest. Down below, the air is a library of smells, pepper from a broken bag that was scolded and forgiven, wine in a cask that tells you it is still wine, resin from spare spars, tar. The faithful bass note. A man checks lashings with 2 fingers and 2 thoughts. He tightens where prudence suggests and writes a small mark on the head of a barrel that has earned confidence. In the corner, ballast stones consider being the ship's patience, which is their trade. They do it well. Idle minutes gather like friendly birds. A sailor carves a whale into a piece of bone no longer needed for food. The whale learns to leap where no sea exists. Only memory. Another man carves a little spoon because a little spoon is always useful and because his hands prefer to be good at something every hour. A third trims a quill, which is the beginning of a letter that will be a beginning again each time it is read. The cat regards all this enterprise with the approval of one who sleeps for a living and admires those who do not. A thin rain comes and confesses itself immediately. It is not here to argue, only to cool. Shirts are spread once more. The deck glosses and then remembers not to be slippery. The wind tilts a little, winds a little more thread through its cloth, and then admits it was only playing. The helmsman moves the tiller as if shifting a sleeping child. After, the air smells brand new. The ship smells like the ship again. You write a few lines you will not mind a stranger reading years from now. You note the lesson the boatswain taught right before he forgot to pretend it was nothing. You thank a man for half an onion and decide not to say his name in case superstition enjoys names too much. You mention a dolphin that became a comet for a while last night. You seal the page with wax and a thumbprint, which is a way of telling yourself that you have a place on this moving street of houses. The letter waits with others for a port where paper remembers to be brave. Even on a quiet day, wood changes its mind and then changes it back. The carpenter attends to these negotiations. He taps a beam and hears a good answer. He works the pump for a dozen strokes just to practice the rhythm. And because the sound pleases him, he tells the mate the ship is as sound as honest work can make her. The mate nods in a language made of nods. You learn that reassurance is a craft, not an accident. Salt fish, a bit of pork, a brown sauce coaxed from onions that surrendered slowly, hard biscuit that consented to be soft, a cup that has forgotten every shore and remembers warmth instead, a story about a market in a town no one aboard can place exactly on a map, which means it is probably true. Supper is not a time, it is a treaty. No one breaks it with hurry. Someone starts a song whose words are tasks. Someone else supplies a second that is mostly weather. The chorus is only a vowel and therefore perfect. The ship accepts the offering and softens her footfall. The stars give their permission by not leaving. You hum a part that has never been written. It fits, because the sea stretches to accommodate anything that isn't sharp. Far ahead, the faintest smudge, land considering itself, or cloud promising to audition for the role. The captain pretends not to notice yet, out of respect for possibilities. The watch notes the bearing because noting the bearing is free. No one sharpens their voice. If a shoreline intends kindness, it will keep the appointment. If it does not, the open sea is appointment enough. You taste a shift in the air that is as good as bread. Evening aboard is a choreography of light. A lantern at the head, another at the quarter, one in the galley that knows the trick of being cozy without being greedy. Reflections climb brass as if practicing to be stars. Shadows choose corners and decide to stay out of trouble. The deck becomes a map of places to pause, your eyes learn to trust the middle tones. Your body learns to read with its feet. 2 strokes. Then 4. Then, later, 6. Then 8. Like steps that lead always to the same porch. The glass is turned each half hour as if time were bread you slice carefully for fair shares. The watch relieves the watch. The ship does not change her mind about motion. She continues to make distance the way a patient woman makes a household, by repeating kindnesses until they accumulate. You go below with the others. The ladder greets you with its polished rungs. Promises not to argue with your feet. Diagonal. Again. Shoulder nested. Knee bent. Hand finds the lashing and says yes in a language made entirely of tendons and habit. A breath. Then another. Then the one that reminds your neck it need not work tonight. Someone coughs politely and is done. Someone snores as if telling a story they will finish tomorrow. The ship provides the punctuation. If the cat visits, it does so with the confidence of an admiral. Let your thoughts be like boats at anchor, bows aligned. Chains softly taut. No need to prove seaworthiness tonight. If a worry arrives, give it a berth and a lantern and tell it the tide will turn in its own hour. The ship rolls a little, and the worry feels slightly silly. Wearing boots on a moving floor, it decides to nap. You approve. What is left is breathing. And breathing is enough. Men walk on your behalf. They listen for the sea's next sentence. They adjust exactly as much as needed. Which is nearly nothing because the ship, too, prefers sleep when sleep is allowed. A brace is taken a finger. A sheet is eased the width of a coin. The difference these make is not small to those who are lying down. You turn once. The hammock agrees. And the world finds the center you meant to bring to it. Time gathers itself and becomes soft. The ship moves through it like a hand through wheat. There is no climax. There is no ending that needs to be proved. The crew have done all the things that make other things unnecessary. The bell will ring when it feels like it. It will not be an instruction. Only a reassurance that numbers still count quietly somewhere. You do not need to hear it to know that. Morning brings its small responsibilities back like friendly dogs. Deck, kettle, rigging. A glance at the weather that looks more like gratitude than skepticism. The captain stretches once and then becomes a sentence with fewer words than yesterday and more meaning. You sit up slowly. You do not rush the world. The world does not rush you back. What was a smudge becomes a notion. Then a line. Then a place. Houses exposed to sun. A key that has learned to be steady. Small boats moving like thoughts under a hat. The lead reports sand good enough to trust. The anchor relieves the bow of decision and takes it upon itself with grace. Sails fold. Lines coil. The deck becomes an invitation to walk nowhere in particular. Men go ashore again with lists that are shorter than yesterday's and therefore luxurious. They return with bread that remembers ovens. With greens that remember gardens. With news that remembers being true even if it has changed outfits since morning. A boy carries back a small packet of pins and feels like a merchant prince. The boatswain ruffles his hair in a way that is almost not a ruffle. The ship eats what she is given, rope, food, rumor. She digests all of it into distance and sleep. Supper. Again. Not different. Better for not being different. A breeze that behaves. A horizon that minds its business. The sudden, undeserved knowledge that the day owed nothing and still paid you. You walk the deck to prove you remember how. You stop walking to prove you don't have to. The hammock keeps writing you into the ship's paragraph. Commas of waking arrive. Considerate and brief. And pass. A muscle remembers a knot it untied yesterday and forgives itself. Far off. A block considers tapping and decides not to. The hull hush keeps its promise without demanding yours. You drift between two gentle shores, the one called asleep soon, and the one named already there. Dawn finds the deck already aware of itself. The water over the side is pewter with a secret brightness underneath. The cook opens the galley door for a breath of air and a rumor of warmth. The boatswain's pipe writes a thin silver ribbon in the morning and then tucks back into its pocket. A man stretches and does not jar the world. The world, in return, chooses not to jar him. Dolphins come in a file of jokes. They invent new mathematics in the ship's bow wave, curves inside curves. Proofs made of joy. One turns sideways to look at you and approves of your face without comment. Another draws a signature in phosphorus that will not last and therefore matters more. You are not asked to clap. The sea does not mind if you only watch. At anchor, the galleon lists a polite degree to expose a stubborn scum near the boot top. Men in the boat scrape with the patience one saves for barnacles and old arguments. Ships flick like small dark birds and fall back to the mother sea. Above, someone eases a brace a hand's width so the hull shows more skin to sun. The ship enjoys being made tidy because tidiness is a way of thinking ahead. The mate reads yesterday to today, wind at east-southeast. Moderate, sail shortened for a squall that mislaid itself, latitude by observation kind to the guess, 1 duff served. Received without complaint, cat performed its duties to general satisfaction. The words are modest as work shirts. The day nods and becomes part of a longer fabric. On the page, the voyage looks like a column of arithmetic that always adds to we continue. Peas and barley have made up their differences in a single pot. Onion persuaded them. Pork officiated. Biscuit softened its opinions for the occasion. A little pepper, smuggled from a torn bag months ago, remembers the taste of land without insisting on it. Bowls empty and do not feel empty afterward. Strings of ocean weed drift like sentences missing a verb. Tiny crabs hitch a ride and look surprised to be at sea, which is endearing and untrue. A man lifts a piece, inspects its passengers, and returns it to its business. Gannet straw cursive above. Editing the air with folded wings. Everything is on its way to somewhere else and not in a hurry. On the bench, a tackle's heart becomes a puzzle solved in oil and patience. The shift shows a groove worn by good service. The pin admits to having been dry and is forgiven with grease. The cheeks get a rub of tar like a blessing. When reassembled, the block feels slightly younger and thanks nobody in particular. Order is the ship's lullaby. Even repairs sing if done at this tempo. A man who has seen too much pretends he hasn't, and tells a story about a market where the fishmonger measured time by throwing salt over his shoulder at clever intervals. He forgets the names of streets and remembers the smell of bread, which is the right way round. The ending arrives without ceremony and nobody asks for another. The silence afterward is the point. You let the tale settle the way ballast settles, usefully and out of sight. When the moon declines to attend, the sky makes room for everything else. Stars crowd the rigging like lanterns hung by saints. The helmsman steers by the wind's polite hand and the compass's quiet conviction. Somewhere forward, a man coughs once to confirm he exists and then forgets to keep existing out loud. Darkness on a ship is not emptiness. It is a soft full drawer where tools sleep. Two hands walk the deck that belongs to everyone. They count by instinct, the boats, scripes, the lashings, the banked galley fire, the lantern on the quarter, the easy fall of the tide. One hums a hymn without a god in it. The other knows the words and keeps them private. If any need wakes, it will find them. None does. At noon tomorrow, if the sun consents, the navigator will let a shadow draw the angle for him. No burning the eyes to see the fiery edge directly, only trusting light to make its own shape on wood. He likes the instrument not just for what it knows, but for what it admits, that the world can be read indirectly and still be true. You hold the backstaff for a moment and feel the polish that comes only from careful hands and long patience. Hard bread teaches two lessons, that hunger is more persuasive than pride, and that water plus time equals mercy. You bite and think of ovens far behind, of millstones, of fields, of the rope walk's long lane. How many labors hide in a simple meal? The ship adds her own labor, carrying all those labors together in the same direction. You finish the biscuit and feel no need to hurry the next thing. The master reads a few lines from the ship's rules. Not because anyone has forgotten them, but because the words like being spoken. No gambling beyond the capacity of laughter. No singing when work requires other music. Respect for the lantern near the magazine. Respect for sleep most of all. Men nod as if tipping hats to neighbors. The sea approves, she prefers crews that agree about simple things. A pale fog arrives with clean hands. Sounds move closer and lose their edges. The bell keeps time for the part of the world that decided not to see. The helmsman trusts the compass, which never takes a day off. The ship's speed becomes these two notes, not much and enough. You stand in a deck-sized room made of cloud and find you do not miss distance. Little ruffles run across the grey water. Foxes are there with quick feet. The sails plump and relax as if practicing breathing. The mate makes a small adjustment and then refuses to make another, which is advanced seamanship. Between breaths, the sea forgets to be complicated. You finish a line and let it choose its rest, loop over loop. Every turn agreeing with the last. The end is tucked like a thought you'll return to. No one praises this out loud. They do not have to. The deck looks right. The future looks easier. Sleep is made out of such small obediences. Salt beef argued with water until both were reasonable. A remnant of prunes made the duff feel almost like a story from childhood. Somebody tells a joke that does not survive translation but survives anyway because of timing and the generous way the teller's eyes wait for your smile. The ship's timbers chuckle once in their own dialect. Night decides to be clear again. Constellations come back from their tea break, unruffled. The navigator looks up and is reassured by a geometry older than his instruments. A shooting star goes about its mysterious errand and is admired without being asked to explain. You choose one bright point and let it be a quiet vow with no words attached. A few hands take the pump because habit is better than need. Water out equals sleep in. The brake is struck up. The levers soothed. The music of enough concluded. The ship feels lighter. Which may be physics and may be gratitude. Either way. Hammocks call names and mean them. Diagonal, always. The rope creaks hollow, the body creaks back and then uncreaks. Civilized by rest. Above, a step passes like a cloud. Forward, the cat discusses policy with a coil and wins. A bell will speak in half an hour whether you hear it or not. Time will continue to be generous without your supervision. Time walks on without asking you to rise. Above, the new watch inherits the sky and finds it unchanged, usefully ordinary. A hand at the helm tests the tiller's weight and finds it familiar as a friend's shoulder. The sails breathe like animals that have learned house manners. The sea keeps her voice low out of consideration for those turned in. You turn once in the hammock and discover there is nothing left to decide. The moon, tardy and unapologetic, climbs the shrouds like a careful sailor and hangs herself on the topmast for a while. She paints the deck in neat rectangles and leaves a brighter coin on each brass ring. Shadows become polite diagrams. A gull, late to everything, writes its name once and then puts away the pen. Light this patient is the same thing as sleep, near the foremast. A man can't resist finishing 3 more inches of a seam though he promised himself he would stop at 8 bells. The needle finds its old holes with the serenity of habit. Wax darkens the thread to obedience. When he knots off, the canvas lies flatter than it hoped to. He pats it like a child who finally slept and tucks the tools away so quietly even the dark doesn't notice. You drift, and somewhere a loose thought is hemmed and won't trouble you again. A smudge of cloud promises a sprinkle, then reconsiders. The wind turns a polite page and leaves the story unchanged. The helmsman eases an inch, the inch thanks him by becoming comfort. The cat, awake for reasons unknown to cats, steps into moonlight, approves of its own pause, and vanishes into rope. Nothing happens so well that it feels like a benediction. A tiny leak above a beam remembers its manners, one drop. Then a pause to consider. Then another. Then repentance. A scrap of cloth is wedged where the deck once insisted on being a sieve. The carpenter will bless it properly at dawn with oakum and pitch. For now, the cloth makes a truce. You hear the ceasefire and do not need to open your eyes to witness it. A soft, inquisitive scuttle maps a route along a beam and stops at the border of feline jurisdiction. The treaty is renewed without signatures. The cat purrs the way a well-tuned block hums when it has a useful load, content with its purpose. The rat chooses diplomacy. Both parties sleep better. So do you. A finger of mist lays itself along the rail and quiets every edge. The bell is rung not to alarm but to keep the ship's place in the world. A small candle for ears. Out beyond. Another bell, far. Almost a memory, replies. The two notes are enough geography for the moment. You float between them. A hammock in a room made of sound. The cook, who cannot bear the thought that the night might forget kindness, makes skilly-gilly, biscuit crushed to humility, coaxed with water and a whisper of grease into something that resembles comfort. 2 cups go forward for the lookout and the man at the helm. A third waits a moment and then finds the hand that did not know it was cold. Warmth travels farther than speech at this hour. By lantern. The mate adds a note in the pilot book where other hands have left their lanterns burning. Good ground, sand with a little shell. Fog frequent toward dawn. Bell early. Fresh water rumoured upriver if the tide is friendly. The book becomes thicker with gratitude. You never meet the men who will benefit, which is the purest form of company. The page dries as slowly as contentment. Another watch flows into the one before it without a seam to catch a thought. A man climbs into your old cold, you leave him your warmth as inheritance when your turn next comes. The ship feels the exchange and relaxes. The sea approves and keeps her shoulder smooth beneath the bow. You do not need to know any of this. The knowing is done on your behalf. The hour before day has its own weather, blue that isn't yet color, wind that isn't yet wind. The deck receives its daily blessing of water and brush. The kettle begins the conversation that ends in breakfast. The boatswain's pipe scribbles a signature and puts itself away. You surface in your hammock and find the ship already cleaned of yesterday's worries. By the mark, 5. By the deep, 6. His voice has the patience of a schoolroom and the courtesy of a chapel. The lead shows sand with a hint of shell. The mate makes the almost decision to anchor and then lets the tide make it for him. A good captain delegates to water when water is wise. You nod without quite waking. Agreement is restful. Oatmeal again. The gospel according to simple food. A scrap of brown sugar appears from a private economy and is shared without drama. Someone salts his bowl and refuses to argue about it. Cups of water taste like oak and miles. The ship eats last, a lick of oil on a block. A rub of tallow where a line has asked for gentleness. Everyone is fed in the way that matters. Anchor up. Easy as waking a child to travel. Sails open like patient lungs. Braces come a hand. The ship tilts to her business and resumes writing the long sentence she began a lifetime ago. Which is to say yesterday. The helm finds its middle. The wake remembers how to draw. You move to the rail and do nothing important for a while. That is what rails are for. A fair wind is not a prize you win, it is a teacher who approves of your listening. The ship leans into comprehension. The crew become punctuation marks, commas at the braces. A semicolon near the main. Full stops for a moment at the pin rail. The sentence of travel grows clear and slow. If sleep returns now, it will be because understanding is tiring in the best possible way. A chafe point noticed yesterday receives today's apology, leather. Neat and unobtrusive. Stitched on with the attention that keeps tempests small. The boatswain nods. Which is his way of clapping. Somewhere. The future thanks you by not happening. You breathe out a worry you didn't know you were storing. Sun flakes the sea with money no one can spend. Flying fish write exclamation points and then remember they are shy commas instead. The ship wears the day the way a captain wears a coat cut for his shoulders, naturally. With the ease of long ownership. If your eyes close standing up. The rail will keep you honest. The navigator takes the sun down with the backstaff and whispers a latitude that feels like a friend's address. The log receives its small square of truth. No one makes more of it than it deserves. The pot offers generosity one ladle at a time. A biscuit becomes more than a biscuit through the alchemy of patience and broth. You sit. You chew. You are content. Let it. There is no task that cannot be better accomplished after a nap that arrives politely and leaves the same way. The watch will trim. The cat will inspect. The bell will keep the arithmetic of time. The sea will continue her long conversation with the keel and never ask you to speak unless you wish to. Afternoon opens like a well-made door, without squeak. On good hinges. The ship slides through a color that is not quite blue and not quite green. A road polished by 1,000 forgotten voyages. The helmsman's hands rest easy on the tiller bar. Not commanding. Only conversing. The wake braids itself into 2 pale ropes and trails the story you are done telling. Air moves with the courtesy of a friend who knows how to visit and how to leave. A hand rigs a short fishing line from the lee rail. More for the piece than the catch. The cork nods as if it understands the plan. The lure flashes once like a rumor and disappears. A man tells of a time a flying fish landed in his hat and saluted. No one doubts him. Because the sea is absent-minded and generous by turns. Whether the line brings up dinner or simply brings up the afternoon does not matter. Wear a stay showed a memory of where. The bosun does what rope doctors do. He worms the groove with thin strands until the lay is a level road. He parcels with strips of canvas. Overlapping the weather's way. He serves with tarred marlin. Tight as a promise and tidy as a prayer. The finish is stroked to shine with a palm that knows the shape of patience. You watch the spiral grow. And your breath finds the same even coil. Far off. A shape pretends to be land and then remembers it is water talking to sky. The ship changes nothing. Which is the correct seamanship. The mate looks. Nods. And turns his nod into a note no one needs to read later. The gull that was considering employment declines and coasts on. The afternoon resumes being afternoon. 2 shirts receive small mercies, a cuff that forgot it was a circle. A buttonhole that tried to be a door. The needles fix both problems without complaint. A man hums 3 notes that belong to every song and to no song in particular. The cat chooses the folded shirts as an annex of its kingdom and is negotiated with. Gently and successfully. Domesticity at sea is its own kind of weather. A water cask is topped and sworn to. 1 thumb of sweet liquid to prove its honesty. The cooper taps the head and hears the pitch of enough. Each orc's a mark only he needs to understand. Which means everyone can understand it by trusting him. The cask goes back to its cradle, the cradle holds without thinking. You begin to trust sounds you could not name yesterday. A boy writes new words into a small notebook, clue, garland, parrel, bits. He murmurs the spellings until the letters consent. An older hand adds a drawing of a belaying pin with arrows that say here, here. The notebook smells faintly of tar and idea. You look over his shoulder. And both of you feel larger. A whale writes a breath into the air, a column thin as a church candle. Another answers at a respectful distance. The ship reduces her own noise without being asked. The whale room gets quiet when someone in it remembers something beautiful. The creatures pass on their inscrutable errand. The wake resumes its knitting. You hold your breath for 2 heartbeats after they vanish. A human instinct older than charts. At the main. The parrel trucks, little wooden beads on a lashing around the mast, receive a check and a tiny favor of grease. They will let the yard go up and down without argument. A civility that prevents much shouting later. The bosun lets 1 bead roll in his palm and smiles as if greeting an old dog. Small things make big quiet. Shadows lengthen into comfortable chairs. The bell announces the arithmetic of time with a melody that refuses urgency. The galley door opens and closes like a heartbeat. The helmsman gives over to another. Hands touching the tiller as if passing a sleeping child. You feel hunger and know it will be answered calmly. Salt pork conceded to water. Then to onion. Then to patience. Biscuit admits defeat gracefully when dipped. A pot of peas becomes the ship's idea of kindness. Talk is bumps on a long flat road and never a hill. 1 joke tries to be loud, remembers where it is, and sits down. Happy to be smaller. You eat until you feel like a person who will sleep well. A topsail is taken in and made up. then loosed to fall properly, all of it done as if teaching the ship to purr. The hands move the way they will move when weather insists. But tonight the motion is rehearsal for peace. Each knot laid becomes a promise to the future, no surprises. Below, you coil the fall and put the end under. Neat as a proverb. On the quarter, the compass keeps its unexcited faith. The needle says westing with the calm of a school teacher who has seen worse students become better maps. The captain adjusts a degree and writes nothing because the ocean already took note. You stand in the lantern's small jurisdiction and accept its gentleness. Night opens like a curtain no one tugged. Stars clock in. Punctual. The helmsman steers by the wind. A star. And a habit, not choosing between them because he doesn't have to. Someone names constellations half right, no one corrects him because usefulness is already present. The ship grows quieter without becoming silent. Time measures itself kindly again. The glass empties. Is turned. Remembers its calling. 6 bells. And footsteps trade places with other footsteps. Below, hammocks are taken like seats at a play where everyone knows the lines and no one needs to speak them. You turn in with the satisfied weight of a well-folded day. Let the thought that woke you unwrap itself and become less. If it asks questions, give it a cup of water and show it the rail where the horizon is asleep. The thought will yawn, nod, and find a spare hammock. You will not see it until morning. And by then it will have become a story that chooses not to be told. You drift. A breeze plays at changing its mind. The mate anticipates and has the anchor ready enough that the sea, noticing the courtesy, decides not to require it. The cable is flaked back to its bed. The capstan bars rest. Preparedness has the magic of not needing to be used. The ship smiles inward. A splinter leaves a finger better than it found it. The surgeon wraps the place with a ribbon of linen and a nod that means you are mended. He puts away the tweezers with the dignity of a man who knows that small health is still health. Another sleep becomes easier because of this mercy you didn't even witness. A tune escapes a pocket, 5 notes. Then the notion of a 6th that doesn't bother to arrive. It loops on itself and becomes a hammock for ears. The sea provides a drone, the rigging supplies a threadbare harmony. No one claps. Nothing ends. It is perfect. Your body loosens another unneeded knot. The mate writes the world in small lines, wind gentle, sea long, course held, nothing to report that isn't gratitude. He dots an I like a man placing a stone on a cairn he did not start and will not finish. The log closes with the contented click of a story that promises tomorrow. He leaves the light as he found it, modest, sufficient, without asking permission. The tide changes its mind. As it always does. The ship bows to the new pull as a dancer bows to a new partner. The bell, far from authority now, marks the half hour like a parent patting a child who already sleeps. You let the tide borrow you. And you do not ask for interest. The rituals return, water over deck, bristles singing their low hymn, a lid lifted and replaced without clatter. Voices operate at half volume. Which is still too loud for the cat and perfectly right for men who know they are caretakers of quiet. The ship smells of clean wood and warm promise. By the mark, 5. And a little. The words are round stones laid in a path you can walk with your eyes closed. The lead comes home shining and wise. The mate nods as if to a neighbor who keeps the same hours. You decide to stay asleep a little longer. And everyone approves. There is comfort in the unsurprising. Uts. A curl of butter that was saved for a good mood and finds one. A pinch of sugar that refuses to be showy. Cups that taste of oak and travel. The cook, having performed mercy, sits for a minute on the step and listens to the ship breathe. You pull the blanket to your shoulder and take credit for the weather. Anchor up, the chain sings a work song older than language. Mud leaves the flukes without sulking. Sails open and remember how to be generous. The galleon leans into motion the way a stanza leans into its rhyme. From the rail, you watch the water agree. The ship moves in one sentence now. Unbroken and very polite, we go. We go. We go. The sun lifts. The wind chooses a key. The sea keeps time. Men become their best quiet selves among such agreements. If sleep returns, let it. If it doesn't, stand and look forward and be part of the going. A corner of a topsail admits to fatigue and is rewarded with a patch so tidy it blushes. The sailmaker knots off as if tying up a thought and smooths the cloth until it remembers it is strong. Above, the wind tries the new work and approves without applause. The ship grows easier by a measure your body understands first. There will be sights to shoot and pages to write and lines to coil and onions to bless. All of that can wait for a half hour that belongs to your bones. The Galleon has crossed seas without you before and can do so again while you drift. Close your eyes. The bells will keep score. The sea will keep the road. The ship will keep you.